Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and very welcome guests. My speech today is all about evaluating and how to give and receive good feedback. I'm going to take you back to my very, very first meeting where I walked into a room full of what were then, for me, strangers. Not anymore, of course, but they were then strangers. I sat down, I listened to some speeches, and after each speech, we were asked to write down our thoughts on a little piece of paper and give some feedback to the speakers. I thank the gods that I didn't actually obey that instruction. I didn't hand in my bits of paper. I put them in my pocket. Why do I thank the gods? Well, I'll tell you. It was because I was being negative. I failed to pick out the positive. Later on that evening, the experienced evaluators came on and gave their feedback and assessments of how each speaker had done. And they accentuated the positive. They found the parts that had delighted, and they told us about the way the speaker had used effective body language or had used the stage well. Yes, we had a stage back then. And I was ashamed, so ashamed that evening I took those bits of paper out of my pocket and I threw them in the waste paper bin. I was utterly ashamed. And you'd think that I would never have gone ever back to Toastmasters, but go back I did. And I started making speeches myself, and evaluators were nothing but supportive and encouraging to me. I had learnt my lesson that very, very first visit, that Toastmasters is a supportive and encouraging environment to all. But that doesn't mean to say that every evaluation does nothing but say, well done, well done, well done. No. Evaluations are also an opportunity to point out some areas where a speaker can do better. For example, at my first speech, my icebreaker speech, I was rather stiff and stood very much in one position and I clasped my hands. Do you know, I had absolutely no idea that I did that. Actually, I was clasping them a little bit lower, but I can't show you on Zoom, so I'll pretend it was like this. And I had absolutely no idea. I do hope I've cured myself of that habit. So although my icebreaker was quite good, actually, that was one thing that my evaluator picked on, and it's something that I have improved upon. So it's been a joy, I have to say, to work with good evaluators. And now, having been a member of Toastmasters for getting on for 2 years now and done not too many, but a few evaluations myself, I'm going to give some tips on not only giving, but receiving feedback. So let's start with receiving. When you give your speech, a couple of half an hour later or whatever, your evaluator will come up and give their idea. Now, it's a personal view, remember. So you do not have to necessarily agree with what that your evaluator says, but it's worth writing down on a slip of paper what they have said. And then ask them the following day to email you the form, or if it wasn't a form, a Word file or whatever, so that you can read it, reflect on it, and work on it for next time. Sometimes the evaluator can make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. I was giving a speech not that long ago where one of the evaluators pointed out that I had actually chosen the wrong speech for that particular audience. I'll just explain a little bit. It was a demonstration meeting, and I had been asked to give a demonstration speech, but I did it on one of my pathways, and I chose where the goal was to connect with the audience. And an international president, past president, a very experienced lady in Toastmasters, pointed out that she felt that my speech was ill-chosen. I shouldn't have used that speech for an audience because I didn't know them. I didn't know a soul at the meeting. It was Zoom as well. So I don't think I actually agreed, because I do think that the people enjoyed it. I tried very hard to engage by looking at the camera and by having some props and by having some amusing parts. And I think it went down quite well, actually. Anyway, so it is a personal view, remember that. Now, let's move on to actually being an evaluator. Does anyone remember what it was like to give your first evaluation? Terrified I was, completely terrified. I'm sure it's certainly a nerve-wracking experience. But here are some tips. Before the meeting, ask the speaker what their pathway is, or you can pick it up from the agenda possibly, but more specifically, the kind of things they want you to look out for, possibly feedback from a previous speech. Download the form. If the speaker hasn't done it for you, you can find it on Basecamp and download the form and use it as a guide. Don't make too many notes. I made a mistake of writing about 5 pages of notes. Just pick out a couple of the things that you loved about the speech. Don't repeat the speech because we all heard it and there's no need and it just wastes time. Try and structure your speech in a sort of 3 layers, if you like. Some people call it a sandwich. So you start with a beginning, which would be a commendation saying what you loved about the speech and how it affected you and all the sort of good things about it. The middle bit would be a recommendation. Now, sometimes when experienced speakers don't have, there's not much you can find to recommend, but it could be lighting, it could be body movement, it could be using the stage, it could be, I don't know, there are all sorts of things that I'm sure that you can find to possibly recommend that the speaker might work on next time. And then the last bit of the sandwich is a further recommendation or indeed a challenge. So ladies and gentlemen, to wrap up, I learned a huge lesson that first day at Toastmasters, and in fact, it could be the reason why I came back. Evaluations are a very powerful tool, and let's make excellent use of them, both giving and receiving. Thank you very much.